Welcome back to Teaching Music Tomorrow. My name is Anne Molesky, and I am here with my friend Victoria Bowler. And today we are going to be talking a little bit about lesson structure and specifically opening routines. So this is something that we talk about kind of in passing, right, with our procedures and talking about transitions maybe more broadly as we have in past episodes. But today we're really specifically going to talk about the way that we start our music classes. And the reason this came up is because I put out a question, as sometimes Victoria or I will do, or oftentimes Victoria will do, on Instagram about what you want to hear, and specifically what you want to hear about on Teaching Music Tomorrow. And someone was asking me particularly about lesson structure and if it's always the same or if sometimes it changes. And I would say that largely for me, and then Victoria, I want to hear how you feel about this. I think largely for me, it does tend to sort of follow a specific format or a flow, if you will. But depending on whatever my behavioral learning objective is for that particular day, we might spend a little bit more time on this section or that section. So the pacing doesn't always look the same. But one thing that does look the same is that students are coming into the music room and starting a music class in a way that is familiar and they know exactly what is happening. So do you have anything to say about that, Victoria?
Yeah, I want to yes and what you just said about well, I want you to go back to your word flow because I know that that's a very intentional word. Like you chose that over a million other things that you could have chosen to call your layout of your lesson. And I think that's useful for you to mention here. Yeah, I want to emphasize that this is why we have templates. And it's not because everything has to be concrete all the time, but when you have a template, you know what kind of buckets you're trying to fill in the lesson. And then, you and I do this, all the time, and we're going to make a conscious choice to not follow the template in a specific class, right? And that's a conscious choice. But normally, having that outline of a high concentration and then a change of pace and then a secondary concentration, we have our opening, we have our closing, it just makes the lesson so tidy. And it also makes it so much easier to lesson plan because you're not looking for like the next fun thing. You're just doing the logical next step. And another benefit of this like template idea is that you're never going to get bogged down with one single song. I don't know if you've ever tried to do this, but like if you have like your one song and you're going to do the whole process, like we're going to have a game and then we're going to do like a notational thing and there's going to be an instrument part, and then we're going to add like the color instrument part, and then we'll all do like an improvisation and a rondo. If you try to cram all of that in one lesson, it is a lot for students and it's a lot for us. And this is something that we could probably talk a lot about, but I'll stop right there. Do you want to talk about your word flow?
Yeah, first I want to touch on what you said because you're talking about these different segments within a larger, like whatever your activity or activities are for a particular song or activity or whatever it might be. There's all these different kind of stopping points. So you're talking about like all these different parts you can add, or you do like the game, or you do like the song, or whatever it might be. And all of these different stopping points lend themselves to a specific lesson fragment, or not a fragment. You could call it a fragment, but I meant to say segment. So a lesson segment that you could kind of chunk so that contributes to our spiral curriculum and layering things over time. And what that does is that helps with our pacing and our transitions because we're able to give students a chunk of something and then come back to it and add the next level on a later date once they've had time to really process and like simmer and sleep on things, so that it can kind of be brought out into their consciousness. But the idea of the word flow when it comes to a lesson plan template is sometimes I think we think about our lesson plan template or our lesson plan structure as something that we have to follow to a T. And so if you think about lesson flow, that's one thing that kind of implies, or it's two things rather. It's more than two things. Words today. It's been a full day teaching, right? But anyway, so when you think about the word lesson flow, it implies that there is some structure, but there's flexibility within that structure. And it really has more to do with the pacing and the way that we're moving from one activity to the next, as opposed to making sure that we always get to like this many minutes here, this many minutes there, and all of that kind of stuff. So all of that to say that depending on what your lesson flow for any given lesson looks like, or what those objectives for that day looks like, your opening routine, to kind of bring it back, the opening routine could always be the same, or it could adjust depending on what it is that you are doing in your lesson for that day, right? So
yeah, great.
No.
Okay, you and I have had a conversation at some point about opening routines, but we're going to revisit it here. Do you want to kick us off with yours?
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to share just a couple of quick ideas. So I know that I've shared this either on my podcast or our podcast together, but I do have sort of my same group of greeting songs that I always do with all of my students, and so they know this predictable pattern. And then I want to share a way that you can kind of adjust it depending on what your learning objective might be for the day, right? So one thing is I saw a colleague of mine as I took students out to observe, and I borrowed this idea from her. And one of the things that she does, and I've done it in this capacity before, but one of the things that she does is she takes the tune of Alabama Gal and she kind of uses that as her transition song. So we've talked about Alabama Gal 8 million trillion times. But what she does as students are walking in the room, so she meets them at the door, and as they move to wherever their assigned music spot is for the day, is she sings, "Walk to your spots, walk to your spots, walk to your spots, show you're ready to learn, walk to your spots," over and over and over again. So I have kind of picked up on this, and so students are walking to their assigned seats, because I do have assigned seats in my room, close to the board. As I'm singing the song, many of them begin to sing with me, and once they're all seated and in their spots, I sing, "I'll stand up," and they all stand up and echo, "Hands straight up." And then I say, "Bend over and touch your toes," and they give me a big woo, and we roll up to the count of 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Twist to one side, twist to the other side, turn all the way around, and I'll sit down. And then we sing, "Crisscross applesauce, spoons in the bowl, spider fingers out, here we go," and then begin whatever hello song it is, right? And we keep a steady beat, and that kind of gets us off to the races. So that does a couple of different things. Number one, they have gone to their assigned seats, right, that they always go to. It's a time-bound transition, which we've talked about, a really clear directive that's time-bound, because we want to get there, by the time I'm done with one of the sections of the Alabama Gal style song. And then they're standing up. We always do the same stretches. They're quick. They're to the point. They have a little vocal exploration. They have clear responses in there. And then they sit down. They know we're going to keep a steady beat and sing a familiar greeting song. Now, if the greeting song is not your jam and you're sick of name games or you're sick of hello songs, you just go into a known song, right? So, for example, if I am doing something with, what grade? Maybe like 3rd or 4th grade, and we're doing Old Brass Wagon, for example, right? So after we do our stretches, we sit down, we have our spider fingers, and we sing, "Here we go, circle to the left, Old Brass Wagon, circle to the left," and keep our steady beat. And then everybody stand on up and make a circle, and then we're off to the next part of our lesson. So whatever it is, it still fits into that known routine, but it can be tailored into whatever the next objective is for students in that class in terms of song material or the activity or whatever it is. But generally speaking, it's a known song in my opening routine, which is a really important piece for me. So that's it. That was like fast and furious, but it's kind of like the little package that I start every class off with. And I got away from it for a while, but I found that it just kind of centers everybody. It gives me a chance to think, if as like one class has gone out and another one is now shooting in, and I'm like, that was kindergarten, now I have 3rd grade, what am I doing with this class? Just because it's something that's familiar for all of us, gets them warmed up, instantly making music when they're coming in the room. And all those are really important transition moments for all of us, right? So I think the big word in all of that is transition, because you've done a lot of stuff in what you just described. You could take any of that and kind of extract that same formula to something else. So like you've talked before about
or we've talked before about transitions and like singing as students move, and like you give the direction in a song so that you're not just like talking at kids all day. And so you have that as students are coming in. It's also, you're going to move into something that they know, and that brings up the engagement. You also have your all stand up, all sit down stuff, so that you're not saying up, 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 up. No, you two, everybody up. And another thing that you said there is that everything is time bound. And that's another reason that we put it inside a musical cadence. So I would imagine, Anne, that this does not take very much time at all in your lesson. And probably, if I were to guess, you probably save just oodles of time having an opening routine, even though it does take time, like your however many minutes it takes, like 2 or 3 at the beginning. You save so much time because music class starts the moment students walk in the door. Class starts immediately. So you're not waiting to get, everybody who needs a drink of water and everybody who like found a rock in the playground. And of course, like timeout, of course, we want kids to be able to have water. Yes, everybody should have access to water. But like every single moment of the school day is not necessarily like the perfect time for you to leave class and get water, So having something where class starts right away, I think is so valuable. And the last thing I'll say is that you have movement here as one of the very first thing, as the very first thing. And I'm sure that's intentional. I hope that you can talk some about that.
Yeah, I think just, you don't know where your kids are coming from as they come, like what happened in their classroom, right? So a chance to get a little bit of wiggling out and immediately start using their voices and moving, even just like that small series of stretches. And I mean, you could make it longer if you wanted to. Makes a big difference, right? Because it's not instantly come into the music class and like you have to be quiet as a mouse. And I think one of the things too that's important to note is like there might be like a little bit of like silly, there might be like a little bit of chatter, there might be a little bit of like just the sheer nature of a transition when kids come into the classroom. Yeah. And I think that that's why this is so useful, because it's familiar. They know how long it's going to take. They know that it's time bound. And so it's okay if that's happening as long as we're still on task. That's something I've been talking about a lot. And I know you and I have had private conversations and podcast conversations about like how much, like what's your level of like buzziness that can happen in a class, like the kind of like hum of student whatever. And I think that just sort of inherently happens. And then one other thing I want to mention, I have a student teacher right now, and she asked me because she wanted to implement this into her classroom. And a student teacher that I'm supervising, and she asked me, she's like, well, how long do you have to wait for all the kids to stand up? I said, well, because there's like a couple of kids who aren't instantly standing up. I'm like, oh no, that's just like, they know I say, I'll stand up. They say, all stand up, and then we're on to the next thing. So if it takes them, if it takes them like a split second or a couple of seconds to get there, that's fine, but we're still moving along and they'll catch up. And that's kind of my philosophy with any type of transition, because it's time bound. That's it's a clear directive that's time bound. And so if you're looking to have students move along, if you're consistently waiting for every single person to be ready and absolutely focused to move on, that defeats the purpose of the transition, right? So anywho,
yes, absolutely. Yeah. And then it's saying to the kids, like, you have complete control over the teacher. Like if you don't stand up, like you hold the entire class hostage, and the adult in the room will let you hold the class hostage. And that's not the way it goes, right? Like we're the leaders and we're moving on. I'll stand up and here we go, right? And so those kids catch up. And also, like, how would you feel if you were the kid who, like, it does take you a second to be like, oh, we're all standing up, right? Like, how many times in a staff meeting are you like, oh gosh, what are we talking about? Oh no, oh dear. Like, if you're that kid and the teacher is like, we'll wait on you, then that doesn't feel good for anyone. So yes, I agree. Like and we've talked about this in the last episode as well. Like, as long as the direction of the class is forward, kids will take different times to stand up and they'll take different times to sit down. And the point is not that we're all like musical robots.
Exactly. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
So there's that. There's my opening routine.
I love it. Okay. Very last thing. This is my transition. Do you change it for upper elementary?
No, they do the same thing. So the hello song, or like whatever song we start by keeping a steady beat to, changes depending on who it is. But otherwise, no.
Okay, well, that's our transition to talk about upper elementary opening routine with me. What I found was I was lacking some student connection, like individual connection with students, specifically in upper grades. And that's the part of our regularly scheduled programming where it's developmentally appropriate for students to not think that the adult in the room is like the shining moon and star, right? All of a sudden, the shining moon and star becomes the friends and the peers around them. And again, like that's developmentally appropriate, but it also means that I wanted to kind of shift my approach and try something new. I have not had an upper elementary opening routine that I have like loved, like been in love with. So I tend to kind of switch it up. And right now, the one that I am using, I do like. So I will share my screen. Okay. So this is a set of opening routine slides for upper elementary. So they walk in and I have some sort of recorded music playing, whether that is pop music or the one that I have for what I'm doing with my students this week. This is a marimba piece by Ivan Trevino. And marimba people will know him. He does like really, really beautiful, beautiful work and kids love it. So we walk in and there's pop music playing and I am at the door, and every single student who enters, your password to get into the music classroom is some sort of greeting to me. And that can be hello. My students like to show off if they learn a word like hello in a different language. They like to show off that they know how to do that. And of course, I love hearing that. I think that's very, very cool. And you can, give a wave, you can give a fist pump, whatever it is, fist bump, whatever it is. So you're going to give some sort of greeting to me. And if students forget, then I'll be like, oh, wait, hang on. And then we say hello and they come in. So there's a moment at the door. And when they get into the classroom, there's some sort of greeting on the board. So this is an example. It says, today we get to blank and blank in our ensemble, if ensemble is our macro concept. So it might be, today we get to sing a new game with Lola, and we get to play an ostinato with Tadidi in our ensemble, whatever it is. On your spot, please use musicality and self-control to, and then there are a million things that we could ask students to do. Silently dance or stretch, create a steady beat pattern to the music you hear, work with a partner to develop an ostinato, create a melodic ostinato, hum the song if you know it, find do, lo, la, lo, so in the chorus, just depending on whatever pop song we're using. If there's like an extractable pattern that I'm going to pull out of that pop song later. So we have several options here, but it's all the same basic idea. So just a couple different ways to get thinking, like what can students do independently? What can they do on their own where they don't need the teacher to do it? So this is what I'm using with my students these days is find open space with empty air between you and the wall or another person. Show your favorite movements in many different ways. And then I have turn, grow, shrink, or sway. So as long as you are in open space anywhere in the room, I am good with that. And then recently what I've been doing is some movement stuff with just some basic mirroring. So if I'm the person holding the hand drum, then as the music is playing, I'm at the front of the room as students are entering. I can see the class, I can see them, and I know that they're all going to be in open space if they're following directions. So either you're going to move to your spot if that's what it says on the board, or you're moving to a place with empty air. So I'm not going to have kids like, in a group of like 5 or 6 talking to each other. They're all going to be around empty air with nothing around them. So they are in open space doing whatever their movement, free movement, free stretching stuff is. I'm at the front of the room wrapping up any conversations that I need to have with individual students. And then I can silently just move to the front of the room. And with a hand drum or with a scarf or whatever, I'm doing just any type of flowy body movements. And that's because this particular piece is very like flowy, aquarium type sounds. And then you are copying me, and then eventually you can copy me, or you can change one thing. You can copy me or do the opposite, and I'll move to different poses. You can copy me or do the opposite. And then a couple classes later, I added 2 different drums. So I have one, and then someone who I know will make like a wonderful, beautiful, perfect, lovely musical decision has the other drum. So now you have 2 points of focus, and you can either follow me or you can follow the other drum. And now we are getting to the place where I can start having two different students. I was doing this recently, and it is so, so cool and so fun because this is my second year at this campus. So these students have not had they don't have like kindergarten through fourth grade years of creative movement experience. So everything that I ask them to do is like it's an actual ask, with upper elementary and creative movement oftentimes. So now I have one student with the hand drum and a second student with the hand drum, and I ask them to do the opposite of each other. And so then the rest of the class can choose which person they're watching. But they have all sorts of silent nonverbal communication of like, am I going to do a low shape? Am I going to do a high shape? Is my drum going to be moving around the room in open space? Well, if one person's moving, the next person is going to stay still and things like that. So this takes all of 45 seconds. It doesn't take long at all. And then it's as simple as continue that movement to your spot. And then we're into the actual lesson. So that's what's going on with me, with my upper elementary people. And it's working well. And when I talk to them, they like it as well because they get to move however they want. As long as I don't extend that opening routine too long, because I get excited, oh, we could do this thing, we could do this thing, we could do this thing, and I get too excited. If I pull it out too long, they don't like it, and so I try not to do that. But for 45 seconds, it's really, really enjoyable, and to see them interact with each other and then pass off the drum to someone else and switch out who's the leader, and just all of the different ways that this movement thing builds over time. It's exactly what you're doing, Anne, and that's why I pointed out in yours that there's some sort of body motion at the beginning of class, because I'll stop my share. Because even if we don't allow them to do the body share, the body motion thing, like the stretching, the wiggling, whatever, they're doing it anyway, right? So the question is, how do we want them to do it? And this is one way that I found to be successful.
Yeah, I love this. I love this so much because there's clear parameters, but there's so much student choice. It's truly wide open as long as you're following whatever your word choice was for the day as the teacher, right? So my question is, what I feel like you would get from anybody listening is how long does it take to practice this? Do they really stay quiet? Talk to me about the management aspect of it. How did it go the first time you did it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the first time I did it, we had, I could even find those slides. I won't pull them up, but I had the directions on the board. We walked in and we did our best, try without me giving them anything. So the directions are on the board and I just saw where are we, right? So they walked through the routine on their own without any direction from me. And then I said, I will pull it up, Anne.
Yeah, go for
it's
it.
funny that you asked that.
And the reason that I asked this is that I think that I think oftentimes what happens, because this was a brand new idea for you, right? And I think oftentimes when we try something new and it doesn't go the way that we expect it to, we're really surprised by that. My hands up, as you would say, right? But the point is that if you're going to try something new, I think you can have the expectation that it's not going to go the ideal way because it's new for everybody and you don't know what type of parameters you need to set up until it happens. It's kind of so many rules are made because something's happened to imply that rule, right?
There was a need, yes.
There was a need for the rule. So it's kind of what you're going to have to prep the next time or what you're going to have to practice based off of the information that they give you. Right. So that's why I was curious. And to also let people know that they should feel free to try new things, even if it doesn't go the way they expect.
That is exactly it. Yeah. So I'll show you this.
Great.
So they walk in and it's whatever routine, we just jump straight in. And then I go through my expectations, this is what it needs to look like. And then how did you do? So if you did all 4, then you would hold up a 4. And if you did 3 of those, but you were not, you didn't enter in a way that was musical and calm and you didn't enter with self-control, then it's a 3. And so then we would try it again and we do it again. And the first time we did it 3 times in a row. And our whole goal, they have something tangible that they can show me how they did. And And they know because we've gone over it, and they're honest. Like kids, these, oh my gosh, these are the big kids, and they know what it looks like to walk in with self-control, and they know what it looks like to not walk in with self-control.
Right.
And when they don't, they're going to show me a 3, and then we do it again.
Right.
And so now I don't need also, Anne, nowhere on here does it say that you need to be silent as you come in. It doesn't say that.
Okay.
Because that's not something that I feel like needs to happen.
Gotcha.
When I get to the front of the room and we're doing the mirroring stuff with me, I do want it to be silent, and that's something that kind of happens naturally. And when it doesn't, I make eye contact with that person, and it's all good, you know.
Right.
But they don't need to be completely silent as they're coming in. And if I wanted them to be silent, I would give them something that I needed them to think about, or something that I needed them to notice, or I would give them, like if I didn't want them to talk, I would give them something else to do with their voices. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it would be embedded. The action or their job would have like a 0 level voice embedded inside of it, right?
Yeah, it would be mutually exclusive.
Yeah. No, so what I love about that is the first time you did it, you said you did it 3 times, and you were very clear. You like gave them a chance just to see what would happen, what kind of feedback they could give you and they could give themselves, really. And it wasn't like a disciplinary, like, well, you weren't quiet or you didn't do this, that, or the other thing. It was just like, oh, okay, well, let's just try it again and see what happens, right? Which is exactly the way to do it. Yeah, I was just thinking about this a lot, actually, because we were doing some unpitched percussion stuff in one of my classes today, and that was the big question, like, well, what about classroom management? I'm like, well, you can't hand kids an instrument for the first time and expect them not to want to play it, right? So same kind of idea. You can't expect students to come in entering a new opening routine, and it's something new and different, and like, you can't expect them to know exactly what it's supposed to look like because it's new. So anyway, not to take us off the beaten path of opening routines, but
no, that is absolutely part of it. Well, and this is our reoccurring, every conversation we have, Anne, can kind of like morph into one conversation.
I know.
Like two, like we have like 1 or 2 conversations, but every conversation is also about the intersection of instructional strategy and classroom management.
Yeah.
And where are those the same? And where are we talking about student engagement? And where are we talking about behavior? And when we start with student engagement and we work on that, then the behavior problems are so much lower because we're not starting by looking at behavior. We're starting by looking at engagement. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And that's what you're talking about.
Yeah. And to just bring it totally home, that's the goal of our opening routines, right? So we have like this short segment that has students physically moving. That was a big component for both of us, kind of a focusing type technique. And for both of us, after we've practiced it, right? After it's been new to both of our students, it was for both of us this year. After they practice it, they know what to expect, and it's a focusing technique so that we can get moving into our lesson and get ready to rock and roll. There it is.
That's it.